We officially have more than half of the Rise of the Floodborn set revealed. And with this, I felt it was a perfect opportunity to talk about 10 cards that will potentially be the make or breaks of the next metagame. Chapter 1 was a lot of fun, but I think it's time to start exploring Chapter 2, and that's exactly what we're going to do today in this video. Let's get into it. At the time of recording, we have still a little less than 100 cards to be revealed, but I think these 10 cards are going to be potentially the trendsetters early on in a metagame, and they're definitely cards worth exploring early to find out if they are honestly good or a bust. Nonetheless, I think it's important to really take in what cards absolutely can be game changing and then decide from that how we move forward when we're planning how to attack the next metagame. Let's get into the first and foremost Christopher Robin. Christopher Robin Adventurer is a 6-cost inkable amber card with 2 strength, 6 willpower, and 2 lore, with the ability of will always be together. Whenever you ready this character, if you have 2 or more other characters in play, gain 2 lore. Now, what I love about this card is that it truly embodies the theme of Amber, utilizing the ability of Unity, and with Unity, gaining effect. In this particular situation, it's actually breaking serve from what many cards in Chapter 1 are incapable of doing. The fact that you can find a way to gain 4 lore quite easily in a turn, or even more with certain synergies, along with the fact that if you can utilize cards like Zero to Hero to get this card into play sooner, it might even be more problematic for your opponent to get rid of to try and get even more gain. Now, in the past, we have seen cards like Rockstar and Stitch Surfer utilize the ability to continuously play cards to draw cards and things like that. This is a different approach. This is now taking the advantage of finding a way to fill the board early, and honestly, most likely with cards that aren't very easy to remove. As an example, I don't think that we're still going to see a lot of love for a Mr. Smee, but like this is an example of a 2/5 character for 3 that's not very easy to just get rid of, that has the ability to just stay on stay on in play and things like that. Like any cards that have high willpower, which is really all about Amber. It is low strength, high willpower more often than not. So having that staying power, utilizing Christopher Robin, you can honestly make very big lore swings, which I love. But in all honesty, Christopher Robin could end up being a threat on his own. And in the same sense, he could end up being a bust. But what I do love about him is that, that ability to gain lore outside of questing, I think is a very common theme within the game for Rise of the Floodborn. In Chapter 1, we really only had Ruby with the ability to do this. Now we have Amber, and later on in the video, we're going to talk about a Sapphire card that does it as well. All in all, I think Christopher Robin is a wonderful starting point if you're looking to find something new to do with your Amber decks. The Sorcerer's Spellbook is a 3-cost uninkable amethyst item with the ability of Knowledge. Exert this, pay 1 resource, and gain 1 lore. Every control deck's best friend. I believe that it's a necessary evil, and let's talk about what exactly that means. A necessary evil means we've spent an entire chapter metagame playing Ruby Amethyst mirrors that are legitimately going to 65-minute game 1 0/0 draws. This card removes that. It is a natural clock that no matter what, very likely you have a potential of a game ending within at least 20 turns. It's better than nothing. Obviously, the longer the card stays in play, the more of them that you get in play, the more of them you're able to utilize an extra resource to gain a lore, becomes a natural clock to the game. And I think this is wonderful. I think that it is very good. It's very powerful, most likely, but it's also just a sheer necessary evil to get out of a really grindy metagame of Ruby Amethyst mirrors and things like that. Having a card that can stay in play that is, quote, must answer or just inevitable death is really important to understand. But honestly, the scary thing about this is that a card like this really means that Ruby Amethyst can totally turtle up. They can really just get away from the offensive threats and just play more removal and more control and more ways to utilize control, and then just rely on gaining one lore a turn. I know it sounds crazy, but some decks can truly get away with that. I'm sure it won't be all in on Sorcerer's Spellbook, but there is a way and like a line that I believe it is possible that you're going to see Sorcerer's Spellbooks decks played like that. All in all, I think this card's a true impact. It's great, and I'm always for anything that it feels needed in the game. And this card, while again is powerful, I just feel that it's going to make for a better game of Disney Lorcana. We'll see if that's true or not. Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo. 3-cost, uninkable Emerald action song. Return chosen character of yours to your hand to play another character with the same cost or less. Before we get too far into this, it's already been noted for the rulings that the card that you do return to your hand can also be the card that you return to play. It's a weird ruling, but it just has to do with information. The moment that the card goes back to your hand, it becomes private information. So there's no way to tell that your opponent has 2 of them or not, which is why you are simply able to just play the same card. I agree that it's weird wording, but we digress. Let's move on and talk about how awesome this card is. Is it the best card in the set? In all honesty, there's a very good chance that the synergy this card brings for the longevity of the game itself is remarkable. But even within the set, it very well might have the most impact and create more Emerald decks just by its sheer existence. The synergy with every entering the play character is unbelievable. And I mean all of them, in all honesty, like just the genies of the world, right? Like just bouncing characters back to hand. Even John Silver's just giving multiple cards reckless, taking away multiple cards from being able to quest in the turn, could lead to game altering states outside of its own, colors. Carefree Surfer being able to draw multiple cards, Rapunzel's being able to heal and draw multiple cards. Like the list goes on for the synergy with this card, and that's the crazy part. The other level of that is Floodborn characters shift can trigger twice. So within its own, you don't really have anything that is very good at this. Because Genie and Mickey Mouse and Cheshire Cat that was just revealed this morning, none of those are necessarily ideal. But out of it, if we look at Tinkerbell's, Tinkerbell is the key one, right? So if we look at Tinkerbell, when you play Tinkerbell, now you get to A, which comes into play, does her 1 damage. And then if you want to, you can either immediately sing with Tinkerbell to play Bibbidi Bobbidi, or you can then swing in with your Tinkerbell, which is insane. So you can go in, do 1 damage to the board, swing in with your Tinkerbell, take a character out, ping another character down potentially, and then use another 3-cost character to sing Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo, target your Tinkerbell, bounce both of them to your hand, keep the 3 costs in your hand for an ink for next turn, and then replay your Tinkerbell with A, no damage on it, and B, do another 1 to the board. I know that my Emerald Steel fans out there are probably screaming at the top of their lungs that this is insane. I'm going to tend to agree with you. I think that's great. And that's just literally one available option for Floodborn characters. And so many Floodborn characters have, when they come into play, effects that it's really insane. This card has like just S tier capabilities. And I am so excited to finally like really get into playing with this card because I think it's one of the more exciting cards in the set. Let's get into the next one. Sisu Divine Water Dragon is a 4-cost uninkable sapphire character with 2 strength, 4 willpower, and 2 lore, and the ability I Trust You. Whenever this character quests, look at the top 2 cards of your deck. You may put one of them into your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. Honestly, Sapphire has an insane amount of lack of draw power. This card in itself, while it is a 4-cost uninkable, to me feels like a must-have in most Sapphire decks that aren't Amber or Amethyst. Now, I know that's removing 2 very vital and important cards, but for, Sapphire Steel, Sapphire Ruby, even Sapphire Emerald, these all feels like a great addition to all of those decks to kind of give yourself some more staying power in the game. And in all honesty, it demands an answer. And by demanding an answer, it makes other Sapphire cards better just by being in play. Now, what do I mean by that? Is like cards like Belle, is just a threat. Cards like Ariel, who's a collector, are threats. So when you have all these cards that are just natural born threats, but the rest of the deck is just kind of like a weird, odd supporting cast, then it's very easy for opponents to just go, okay, I'll just remove Who's It Collector, or I'll just remove Tomoteo, or I'll just remove Bell. This card now demands an answer from a supporting role because it's the first one that has longevity in the game that can really influence a game. And I think that's a key factor, is that this is going to draw out removal to keep you off card advantage, which then just naturally makes all of those other cards better cards. So that's another thing I really like about this. This is another one similar to Christopher Robin that, like, maybe this could end up being a bust. 4 cost uninkable, 2/4. It's not like the greatest thing ever, but it also has the ability to just fill such a role in Sapphire that by default, if we don't get any other cards that are similar that can give you the ability to have cards in hand and keep moving through the game and keep filtering through your deck, then then I think this card has very good playability. Also, here on the Forbidden Mountain, we love our 1-ofs and our 2-ofs. This is the perfect card for that. Playing 4 of this is similar to playing 4 Be Our Guest. Like, it just enables you to play less numbers of certain cards that you don't need every game. This is the kind of the same concept of, all right, I can play less of those cards because if it comes up off the top, I can make my decision in matchups if I want or do not want it. So all in all, I like Sisu the Dragon. I think it's great. I think the card's interesting. I think it really does fill a role for Sapphire. Let's get in the next one. Shere Khan, Threatening Predator, is a 3-cost inkable ruby character with 3 strength, 3 willpower, and 1 lore. His ability is don't insult my intelligence. Whenever one of your characters challenges another character, gain 1 lore. The key components of this particular character is that it turns Reckless into lore, it has synergy within Ruby with multiple characters, and it's really solid come from behind potential, along with being good at almost any point in the game. Now, this is a card that was recently spoiled. We don't have the exact English translation of it, and what I wrote there is an assumption of what we believe it will be. But what I like about this card and the potential it represents is that it makes cards like Gaston trade for a character and get you a lore. It makes cards like, the more recently rush-oriented Queen come in as a 2/2, remove characters, and gain you a lore. Mally now gains you multiple lore potentially. Aladdin would gain you 3 lore. Like, the Ruby in itself, right? Like, just within Ruby, you're gaining so much synergy from just challenging, which is what Ruby was already all about. And it always felt like a detriment of a choice. Like, oh, I have to play these cards as removal, but because of that, I can never move the game forward. This is, again, like that necessary evil feeling. And it's also, again, like a game-breaking thing. And it's the first card that I can really see that is truly encompassing come from behind victories. Now, all of the outside questing lore gainers can really make this argument, but this card does it through board presence as well, which is what I really enjoy. Having the concept of, like, just saying, all right, my opponent has so many cards in play, but if I challenge everything, then I can't get any lore because all the trades are bad, and then I can't actually threaten a win. This card takes all of that out the window and breaks all of the numbers in the game. I think this is a great card in general. I think it's one of us. It's going to end up being a staple, I feel like, in most Ruby decks. And in all honesty, the Ruby 3-cost slot isn't anything to, like, ride home about either. So just being a 3-cost 3/3 with this ability and the potential to gain you, over the course of the game, 3 or 4 or maybe even more lore, specifically in, like, we've seen it so many times now where Rockstar decks just go flood the board with a bunch of wonky don characters and you have to answer those and you don't gain any benefit. Now it's just like, all right, I'll play this guy later in the game. I'm going to remove 4 or 5 of your characters and still gain 5 lore and change the numbers dramatically. I really, really think this card has the potential to be an absolute meta changer. We'll have to see if that's true, but I think this guy is really, really good. Get to the next one. Cinderella Stout-Hearted is a 7-cost inkable steel card, 5 strength, 5 willpower, and 3 lore. And she has Shift 5, Resist 2, and the ability The Singing Sword. Whenever you play a song, this character may challenge ready characters this turn. All right, so our perks of this character is we're a Floodborn, Resist +2. What does Resist do again, guys? Damage dealt to this character is reduced by 2. The Singing Sword ability is an absolute game altering ability. It really does messes with a lot of outcomes and changes when players are playing for the end game. And I just have a real, just a little hint. Like, does this remind you of any particular super rare from chapter 1 that had a bunch of abilities and did a lot of like game breaking things? Why does Steel keep getting these? I mean, seriously. In all honesty, I think Cinderella, we may have like already kind of forgotten about her, right? Like this card was spoiled weeks ago, and you may not even remembered or forgot how powerful it might actually be, which is exactly why we're here and we're discussing as we're starting to build for a chapter 2 metagame. This card's phenomenal. It breaks serves on so many different scenarios. Resist 2 is, man, it feels really good. This character survives against Maui. Maui cannot one for one this character, even though it only has 5 willpower. When Maui swings, you only take 4. And now the next card that comes in has to have 3 strength just to even get this off the board. Meanwhile, you're doing 5 back both times. So this is a steel character that actually not only survives Maui, but also takes him out in the process. It's it's really good. It's really insane. The Singing Sword ability is phenomenal. You can really set up a board state where your opponent is like, oh, I'm going to be okay because I can just play my card, sit back and relax, and then get my lore, and my opponent can't catch up. Cinderella just doesn't allow for that. She's like, no, I'm going to just play Be Our Guest or play any song that we want to talk about that has come out that's playable. And not to mention, guys, we did just learn in a ruling that you can play an action regardless if it can resolve or not. Now, whether or not that sticks and is a true ruling, debatable. But in the most recent Twitter polls that or we discussed in our Discord, you can just play a song. Like I can just play World's Greatest Criminal Mind, even if I don't have a target for it. And since I played the song, Cinderella would then be able to swing into whatever character my opponent has. Let's say it's a Cusco. Well, if it's a Cusco, it's like, yeah, I'll just play the song and I'll just run Cinderella into Cusco. By the way, your Cusco, it will remove Cinderella because of no touchy, but it wouldn't have dealt any damage, which is also insane. All in all, this card, I think, is one of the build around premier cards of the set. And it's just going to fit so well into so many steel decks as is. And yeah, this is definitely one of the, I think it's at the top and echelon of the list. It's phenomenal. Anywho, let's keep going forward. All right. So far we've gotten through 6. We got 4 more to go, but I felt the need to put some honorable mentions in here real quickly. And what I want you to do, if you haven't yet, smash that like button for me. If this is your first time here, you're liking the video, you're liking the vibes of the channel, hit the subscribe. But then let me know in the comments what you think are the premier cards to build around for Chapter 2 as you're starting to look at the landscape of what Rise of the Floodborn is offering. For me, these 3 cards didn't make the top 10 so far because I wanted to discuss other things. But hey, Mufasa, phenomenal card, incredible ability. The idea of when he's banished, you get to flip the top card of your deck and reveal it's a character, comes into play, changes lots of things. Donald Duck for Emerald. I think a lot of people are like, oh, hey, let's play this card to like put more cards in my opponent's hand so I can like make them discard more. No, I don't ever want a card that reads my opponent draws a card in my discard deck. Not at all. But what I love this for is your natural homegrown aggro emerald decks love this card. I mean, this card is great for them. They're just like, yeah, I'm just gonna put a 4 lore or a 4 cost 2/5 into play with 2 lore that also is gonna let me draw another card next turn. So I can just continue to pressure the game as an aggressive player. Phenomenal. Definitely a notable card for any emerald aggro deck. 100%. And then Ratigan, he is the most niche of the honorable mentions, but in all honesty, there just isn't any good Ruby cards yet, like aside from Shere Khan. And I really wanted to give Ruby a little bit more love. And this card might be a little too niche, but it does have some very fringe playability with cards like Robin Hood and things like that. So I'm sorry, not Robin Hood, Christopher Robin, duh. I just think that he's niche, but hey, I think that there's a chance that card might actually be good. We'll have to see in time. All in all, let me know what your favorite cards of the set so far and what cards you're looking to build around. Let's get into the next card. Grand Pabbie, Oldest and Wisest, is a 7 cost, uninkable Sapphire card, 3 strength, 6 willpower, 3 lore, with the ability Ancient Insight. Whenever you remove 1 or more damage from one of your characters, gain 2 lore. Grand Pabbie has the potential to gain 2 or more lore unexpectedly. It combos incredibly well with Steel and is a threat himself at just 3 lore. Now, first and foremost, I was out of this world excited about Grand Pabbie. Again, huge Frozen fan. Always going to kind of nerd out and wonk out for the Frozen characters, but in all honesty, this card is really, really interesting. I know we look at cards a lot of often saying like, man, can you really come into play and not do anything like immediately? However, I do believe the way that Sapphire is presented and having items like coconuts and having items like the new I've been calling it crock pot. The new pot that was spoiled on the Illuminatiers of last week. I can't remember the name of it right now. I'll put a picture of it here. But having cards like that, having cards like Magic Flower, you can actually set up the board to when you play Pabbie, if you have these things, you could do immediately trigger Pabbie, which is really interesting. And I think that that's the key factor here is that you can actually set up a game where when you play Pabbie, you're able to just flat win the game. I also think it represents these really out of the box, ordinary ways for Sapphire to win again. Cards like Tomateo, cards like Belle, all of these cards need other things to really help them get over the hump. So having this kind of out of this nowhere effect is really oppressive. If you're on 10 resources already and you just know that like your opponent just doesn't have an answer to Belle, which I know seems unlikely, don't get me wrong, I get it, but you have cards like Aurora Dreaming Guardian, you have cards like Cogsworth with giving resist. So like there's a ways to really set up this turtle mode. I think Sapphire might be able to do this better than anything, where they can really set up this turtling board and then out of nowhere just gain like literally 15 lore in some cases. I know it sounds dramatic, but with Belle gaining 5, with Tomateo gaining 4 or 5, with Grand Pabbie being able to gain 2, 4, or 6, like you might just be able to do these really out of the box things to go from like a literal 5 to 20 on a given turn. I think it's like a very awkward combo-ish scenario that I'm talking about here. I don't know if it's going to be a tier 1 meta concept. I'm not here sitting here to tell you that like it's definitely going to be that. But again, when we're looking at cards to explore, I think Pabbie is another one of those cards that is just really interesting and really game altering because again, gaining lore outside of gaining lore the turn you can play a card is just not common enough. And this character reads the potential to gain 2 or more lore, depending on how you can set up the game and set up your board. I really think Pabbie has the potential to be very good. But I'll also admit that it is a 7 cost uninkable. You need things to go your way. You need to have the right scenarios and the right synergies, and maybe it ends up being a bust. I'm hopeful that the card ends up being very good and very playable, and honestly a staple in the metagame. Time will tell. Let's get in the next one. Merlin, Goat. 4 cost, inkable Amethyst. Character that is a 4 strength, 3 willpower, 1 lore, with the ability Here I Come. When you play this character and when he leaves play, gain 1 lore. So of course the abilities to note here is Here I Come. Once again, another character that comes into play and immediately gains lore, changes the math and outcomes of games. This very well might be the best Amethyst 4 cost card in the game to date. It honestly doesn't need any of this help that I'm about to talk to you. And before I go and I talk about the synergies, right? This character alone, as an inkable 4/3, comes into play and gains you a lore, and then when he leaves play, you gain another lore. Just by that, this card's playable. I'm not kidding. Like, you don't need any of these other things we're going to talk about at all. You would play this card just in your control Amethyst Shells, just because of that effect. It's just an addition to Spellbook, and everything else after this is just bonus. I just really want to state that how important that is, that you might find this card in just Amethyst decks because it's just a good card, period. Now, cards like White Rabbit's Pocket Watch, cards like Bounce, cards like Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo, right? Like all of those things, if you can say, all right, I'm going to play any 3-cost character on 3, great. My 3-cost character survives. On turn 4, I play Merlin. I will sing my 3-cost character and I'll Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo Merlin. Great. You just gained 3 lore in turn 4. And in aggressive strategies and Emerald Amethyst aggressive strategies, that's awesome. The backup plan to that is playing Donald Duck that I just talked about in Honorable Mentions, where you're just going to be able to draw more cards to be able to set up this play later on. Because later on, even if you don't have a 3-cost character, you might be able to get to the point of just going, play Merlin, and then cast Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo, gain 3 lore. Very, very good. Very, very playable. Definitely not taking anything away from that concept. But what I'm just saying is that this card is so good that you're going to play it without any of those things. Like, this is still one of the best cards on curve to play, period. And because of that, just a total win of a card. Absolutely a meta-defining card. I think you're going to see this. In my opinion, this is going to be in every single Amethyst deck. It's very hard for me to like put together an Amethyst deck that will not play this card. It fits in aggro decks, it fits in mid-range decks, it fits in control decks. It literally just fits all over the place. And it's an uncommon. If I had to bet right now, I do think it's in the starter deck. I didn't go and confirm this, but if it's in the starter deck, that's good for everybody. If this is not in the starter deck, then this is going to be your Flynn Rider or your Cheshire Cat of the set, where it's like, just because it's an uncommon, it's going to be a potential $3 to $5 card early on in sales, just because everyone's going to want for this card. I digress. Next card. The Queen, Commanding Presence. 5-cost, inkable amber character with 4 strength, 3 willpower, 2 lore, with the ability of Shift 2 and Who is the Fairest. Whenever this character quests, chosen opposing character gets -4 strength this turn, and chosen character gets +4 strength this turn. Obviously, the 2 takeaways here are that we're Floodborn and the ability of Who is the Fairest. But I do believe her Commanding Presence name is wonderful, because in all honesty, this character really does command board presence. If there is a cheaper queen that is revealed, I do think the stock of this card does go up. Without it, maybe not as good, in all honesty. We're definitely hoping to see a 2 or 3 cost like queen that we can shift onto to get the full effect out of this. However, if Amber is able to find a way to be more controlling, this card is absolutely phenomenal for, the world's greatest criminal mind and things like that, because it just basically turns anything in the ability, anything in play just gets removed from the song, which is great. It still is 2 lore. The 4/3 at a 5 is but we're inkable. If this was uninkable, the card would not be very good. But I do think it's going to be one of those cards that flips games upside down. I don't want to say it to the extent of this card is like the Amber Maui, but in some ways, I could compare it to say that it's going to try and act as an Amber Maui, because its turnaround is really powerful. 4 strength, if you can minus something by 4 strength, you can pretty much remove it for free. And then the concept of buffing something for 4 strength and then removing it with the song if you have to, or if you can't, just buffing another character in play that you have by +4 strength. I mean, most cards getting buffed by 4 strength will banish literally every character in the game. So just by that, this is just a very commanding the board presence type card that your opponent might not even be able to react to, which is the scary part, is that, if they walk into it and if they don't see it coming, then this card, much like Tinks, sometimes your opponent just goes, well, if they have Giant Fairy, they got me. This card also feels like that. Like, if you just have the Queen, you're going to really blow people out. And I think that's a lot of good potential, and it's a lot to really be hopeful towards. Again, we'll see if this card does end up making the cut, but as a 5-cost inkable with this much potential for swinging board states, I think it's going to find its home in Amber decks for sure. Cogsworth, Grandfather Clock. 5 cost inkable, sapphire character, 2 strength, 5 willpower, 2 lore. Shift 3, ward, and the ability of unwind. Your other characters gain resist +1. So the notes are right here. It's a Floodborn character. It has ward. Its ability is insane. Profit. I mean, in all honesty, like, again, does this remind you of some other secret super rare from chapter 1 that just had a lot of abilities, a lot of text, and did a lot of things? This is very similar, and my favorite ironic part is that, man, does it put cards like Grab Your Swords, like Tinkerbell, like Fire Their Cannons, like Smash. Like, yeah, Smash still does too, but like this is the perfect card for really interrupting the chapter 1 metagame. This might be the most influential card early on in chapter 2 just because of where we're at the end of chapter 1's metagame. This card is so clear and above a direct answer to steal, which is the most dominant deck in the game, being paired with Amber, that is exactly how you should be looking at this character, is that understanding that at a base level, this character itself really dampers the most prolific deck in chapter 1, which is exactly why we save Cogsworth to this moment, is that when we look at a landscape and we look for defining cards, you have to look at cards that directly answer the previous metagame, because this is a great starting point. A lot of players in metagames will start with taking whatever the best decks are from the previous meta and just upgrading them. So any of those players that do that, any of those players just go, oh, my Amber Steel deck, I'll just put in a Sleepy, or I'll just put in a Christopher Robin, and I'll add Criminal Mind to my deck, and I'll just have like a 1.5 chapter 1 Amber Steel deck. Great. This card punishes them. I mean, like, literally completely dominates that deck just by itself. 2/5 with ward, and it doesn't have resist on its own. Great, but it still survives the ridiculous double Grab Your Swords play. But the other thing about that is that with its existence, double Grab Your Swords does only 2 damage, and the Tinkerbell they played did 0 damage. So like now that whole turn is just to remove Cogsworth. So when you start considering these things, you understand how powerful he would be just in that metagame. If he existed in chapter 1, even without a shiftable target, he would have saw play. Just because that effect is that good. Being on a 2/5 lore that's inkable, all the bonus of it. Like, all of it is a bonus. And that's what I love about this card, is that in its essence, its core essence to the card itself that was revealed weeks ago that you may have just kind of put back there and forgot about a little bit. Don't forget about the Grandfather Clock. It's an absolute dominating card moving forward in the metagame. Gotta love it. Guys, if you enjoyed this video, I would please let me know in the comments, what is your pick for best card in the set? We have our website, just came out at the beginning of October, been releasing tournament reports, decks from all the different events and things like that. And we have a section dedicated towards Rise of the Floodborn cards. Might be a little bit behind, but you never know. We try to update that as often as possible. And with all of the cards coming in the coming days, if you want to see one of the more quicker responses and ways that we feel, obviously join the Discord. If you're not, the link is in the description below. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. I will catch you in the next one.